Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. From out of the west with the speed of light and a hearty hi-yo silver, the Lone Ranger rides again.
Love that song. Everybody does know that the William Tell Overture was what they used for the theme of the Lone Ranger, right? I hope so. Okay, moving on. Clayton Moore was born Jack Carlson Moore in Chicago, Illinois, and fun fact, he was the first person ever to get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame with his character name of the Lone Ranger and his name. Clayton Moore began his career in the year 1938 as a stuntman and a model. Now, as an actor, he was no stranger to the cowboy roles. He starred in the serials Jesse James, Zorro, and he even later on played Buffalo Bill. Clayton Moore also served in World War II. Thank you for your service, sir. In the year 1949, Clayton Moore got his most famous role playing the Lone Ranger in the TV series. Now, his co-star, Tonto, was played by Jay Silverheels, who was part of the Mohawk tribe. Okay, for a couple seasons, due to contract dispute, John Hart played the part of the Lone Ranger. Now, what is interesting to note is that they had different styles of masks. John Hart, Clayton Moore. Do you need to see that again? John Hart, Clayton Moore. 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 Okay, I'll stop. I digress. Of course, Clayton Moore came back and he finished the run in the year 1958. That's 9 years on television. Due to the immense popularity of the Lone Ranger in syndication, Clayton Moore spent the rest of his life making public appearances dressed as the Lone Ranger, and his lifelong pal, Jay Silverheels, would sometimes join him. He even made public appearances at the newly opened restaurant, the Lone Ranger restaurant, very short-lived in Southern California. But in 1979, Jack Rather, who owned the rights to the character Lone Ranger, slapped a lawsuit on Mr. Moore. He didn't want him to dress up as the character because he was having a 1981 movie produced called The Legend of the Lone Ranger. Now, Clayton Moore had a counter lawsuit. The public were on his side, of course, and the movie, deservedly so, was a great big bomb. So the lawsuit was dropped before Clayton Moore passed away just a few months later. This is Todd Pickering for Walk of Fame Wednesday. Hi-yo, silver away! I'll see you next week in Hollywood. Ladies and gentlemen, my cinematographer, Steve Lewis.